The 2023 Overwatch League MVP candidates have officially been revealed. This year, the 10 players that are in the race are Lip, Stalker, Someone, Shu, Fielder, Zest, Violet, Fearless, Skewed, and Merit. Voting for fans will begin on August 25th and will go all the way until September 3rd. Fan voting accounts for 25% of the MVP tally, with the other 75% coming from a combination of Overwatch League teams, broadcast talent, media, and select community influencers. What are your reactions to this list? Did they nail it? Do you think it sucks? I'm somewhere in between, because some of these guys feel like they shouldn't be here, and others are pretty given that you really couldn't have messed up. If you're wondering how this list came to be, if you're more on the angry side, just know that Overwatch League teams were responsible for this list being what it is. Just going down this list super quick, I'd say that the ones that definitely needed to be here, that made the cut of course, are Lip, Someone, Shu, and Fielder. Those four guys were absolutely insane this year and were some of the biggest superstars of the Overwatch League for one reason or another. So that's all good and well, and some of these other names also aren't too bad either. Like, he's not going to be your first vote or anything, but Stalker being here makes sense. You could probably argue he deserves to be on the ballot, especially in the first half of the season. His Tracer has arguably been the most dominant of any player this year, so that's great. And then also, I think you probably needed to have at least one East player for representation from that region. Skewed, I think, from start to finish has been the star player of Soul Infernal, so if I were to pick one guy over the other, I think my money would probably be on Skewed. But Zest has boasted an especially strong second half of this season, oftentimes dominating games and being the clear leader for Soul Infernal, so he also makes sense in this scenario, but I just don't feel like both of them should be here. I know you gotta give the East some love, but outside of Soul Infernal and I guess Hangzhou Spark, they've kind of been a joke of a region, so you really can't give them that much representation. But yeah, I'd say only one of them was probably needed here. Also, another guy that's somewhat interesting on here is Fearless. Again, definitely not a top choice for me personally, but one of the better tank players in the league this year. Definitely the best Winston player, and outside of maybe Someone, he's probably been the second best tank. He's role star worthy. He's been one of the leaders of the Outlaws. I'd say Shu is definitely their most valuable player for sure, but Fearless, I guess, kind of makes sense, especially because if he wasn't there, there'd probably only be one tank player on here, and that would feel kind of weird. Although, then again, Overwatch League only had Shu on the ballot last year for supports, so maybe it's really not that weird after all. In a way, I wouldn't have minded if it was just Someone, as I think he's clearly been the most valuable tank player in the league. He's just exactly what you're looking for in terms of flexibility and domination and being a leader. He had all of that, and he was basically second to none, and I'd even argue that he was noticeably ahead of pretty much all of his competition. But as a good monkey player in a monkey meta, plus showing some underrated versatility on Ramatra, I'd say that Fearless being here isn't the end of the world, although I wouldn't say that I'm super pleased with it. Although Fearless may be the least of people's concerns. Where people are going to be really upset outside of the Eastern players, of course, is probably Merit and Violet. Starting with Violet, it almost feels wrong to say that he doesn't belong on an MVP ballot, just knowing the kind of player he is and the pretty good season that he put up. But that just feels like the truth to me. He shouldn't be on the top 10. He was good, he was really, really amazing. Him and Shu were like the second best backline in the league, but from a most valuable player standpoint, he just shouldn't be in the top 10. Shu just did more of the heavy lifting, there's no debating that, I'd say. But also, by having Violet here, it almost feels like you're robbing two other really good potential candidates. First of all, if you wanted to give a main support some love, why wouldn't you put Chio on here? You could have very easily have ditched Stalker if you wanted to for Chio. I don't think anybody would be complaining about that. Stalker had a great year, but Chio was by far and none the best player at his position. I love Violet, I literally think he's the GOAT, but come on, man. Chio's Lucio and Brig put everybody else's to shame. He is on a different level when it comes to this kind of stuff. The type of season he had from like a stereotypical main support hero perspective is probably the most impactful I have ever seen from that position. This position is the least flashy, it gets the least amount of attention, but Chio still found ways to stand out on a star-studded roster as the main support and make huge plays for his team to make that mid-season madness title theirs. I mean, yeah, you could argue Violet was the second best main support in the league if you wanted to, but that's a bit more up for debate, as there's a couple of other great main support candidates out there that you can get into an argument with about him. With Chio, there is no arguing this stuff. Nobody's gonna say that there's somebody better than him out there. Like, what are we doing? I understand you can only have 3 players per team, but really, we should either A, be making an exception because Chio had an historically good season, or B, Violet just shouldn't be there either. I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel. But that's not all. Honestly, I feel like if you're going for a third Houston player, that Happy would have been a better pick over Violet. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like Happy has arguably been the second best player on this Houston team aside from Shu, and arguably their most important playmaker. Mansombra was the only one that was even comparable to Lips in the first half of the year, and then he picked up Tracer and became one of the best in the league on her as well. He has been the best on 2 of the most important heroes in the meta up until this point, and yet he doesn't get any sort of recognition for it. He's done a lot being able to switch between both roles and still having that high impact. He just deserves more than this. He should be in this conversation over Violet. Either that or you ditch Fearless. One of them should be going in favor of Happy. He's arguably been either the second or third most important player on the team, and the Outlaws have been consistently like the second best or even best team in the league depending on who you're talking to. So yeah, Happy should be here, at least in my opinion. When it comes to merit, I'd say that he just hasn't had that kind of impact that you're looking for when it comes to MVP. He's been really good this year, obviously a star player, but I wouldn't even say that he's a role star this year. Maybe an honorable mention, but not enough to warrant an MVP nomination. And I say that mostly because his Sombra has just been decent, right? Sombra's been the consistent meta pick this entire season, and he's just been alright on her. Nothing terrible or anything like that, definitely reliable, but not a standout like Happy or Lip, for example. He's been really good on other things. I mean, his Widowmaker's arguably been the best or second best in the entire league. He's been good on Sojourn and on Hanzo, but their pick rate is a lot lower than Sombra, and you have to factor that in when making this kind of conversation, because it's all about the primary stuff that you're playing in the games. That's what you're looking at in terms of your success. Are you the best at the thing that everybody is doing? Don't get me wrong, Merit and Checkmate have been like one of the best DPS duos in the league this year. I will not fight you on that one, but I feel like the only Mayhem player that should be on the MVP ballot this year is someone. So that's kind of my feelings on all of the candidates that are here. I'd say a decent amount of them are good. I have no issue with them. There's a few that I really like, a few that I kind of like, and then a few that just don't make sense to me. When it comes to snuffs, I mentioned Chio and Happy, but I feel like there should be some Boston representation on this list. They haven't been a god tier team, but still one of the better ones in the league, and Twilight in particular has been an outstanding support player, arguably role star level with his Ana play. He's carried that Boston team a ton, and has given them a lot of well-needed consistency. Boston are 10-4 this year. They're no scrubs. I feel like we shouldn't have representation from just 4 teams. Again, you can get rid of one of the guys we've been complaining about, or you could simply get rid of one of the Infernal players and only have one guy there. A Boston player should rightfully be squeezed into this list somewhere. And lastly, I think Alfie deserves an honorable mention here. I don't know if I'd personally put him in the top 10, but I know a lot of you watching definitely would, with the type of performance that he's put on for the Washington Justice this year. They haven't been a god tier roster by any stretch, but without him, they're absolutely nothing. His flexibility and his tracer play early on has led the way to the Justice being in contention for a play-in spot this year. But yeah, those are my snuffs / honorable mentions who maybe should have been on the MVP ballot. Now that I've gotten this needless video essay and pent-up rage out of the way, let's get into the most deserving candidates to win the MVP award. I don't know if I'll necessarily choose today. I may wait until I make a more detailed video on all my choices for the awards sometime next month, but if I had to go through it, I'd say that my favorites right now are Lip, Someone, Shu, and Fielder. Starting with Lip, he's been great since the very beginning this year. I'll reiterate what I said previously. In a Sombra-centric meta where you need her to win, Lip has been the best on her. At least up until now, if you didn't have a Sombra, you simply could not win. And a lot of these teams knew that they had no hopes against the Reign, and it was largely because Lip go burr, Lip go kill. The way he aggressively plays this hero is so hard to keep pace with, and a lot of teams decided not to bother because they know they really don't have a chance against this guy. He finds way too many kills, like way more than he should on this hero, and he laps people in his sleep when it comes to that EMP charge. He just absolutely farms people. The Reign can really push up that tempo, and their success speaks for itself. They've been the best team in the league. They won the only tournament we had, and they're on track to have the best record. And in a Sombra-centric meta like this, where it's really important to have a good Sombra, that points to Lip as one of the main indicators behind their success. So I'd say that he deserves a lot of votes. But another guy on his own team, in fact, that deserves a lot of the credit is Fielder. And the more I think about it, the more I'm starting to believe that he actually might be the MVP of the league. We've seen Fielder do some ridiculous things in the league since 2020. He's been doing this stuff for years. But this year in particular, he's taken it to a different level when it comes to impact and consistently noticing his presence. Support play has arguably been the most important aspect of the Overwatch League this year, and Fielder has excelled alongside Chio. They've both been cool, calm, and collected this entire year, but Fielder's just done a bit more. He's been right up there with Shu when it comes to impactful support play and seriously making a difference in a fight-to-fight scenario. I fanboyed about him so much already, so I'll try and keep this brief. But the way he positions himself is so intelligent. He's able to find so much value with his cooldowns despite playing from so far away. But by playing far away, it makes it harder for the other team to get to him, and it spaces everything out really nicely. He just has a good understanding of how to get the most possible value out of Ana, which has been one of the primary meta picks this year. And aside from the consistency, his clutches have been crazy. We saw what he did in that finals matchup against the Outlaws. He was literally unstoppable, and what he did against Boston during the regular season not that long ago. He always comes up big for his team and ends up being one of the more important contributors to super close wins. Nothing rattles this guy. He's had maybe like 1 or 2 off games at most this year. It takes a lot to outplay this guy. I mean, Shu, another MVP candidate, it took him playing out of his goddamn mind for the Outlaws to beat the Reign and to outplay Fielder. That's how much respect this guy demands, and that is why he is definitely one of the front runners to win MVP. Or maybe you prefer Shu and his playstyle. It differs compared to Fielder, they're like exact opposites, but the result is often the same, where they find significant impact compared to any of their support counterparts and are a major reason why their teams are currently at the top. Fielder is more so heal-centric and playing more reserved, but Shu has that aggressive style. He's a bit more selfish, but in return for that selfishness, you're getting more value out of the big cooldowns, and you get to benefit more from his mechanics on a character like Baptiste, for example. Shu brings a lot of that, and especially it works good for the Outlaws, because they don't necessarily have the same level of mechanical talent, especially in the current meta compared to like Atlanta Reign, let's say, at DPS, but Shu often helps make up for that at times because he basically is a DPS himself. And like I was saying, support has been the driving force behind the top teams this year, so needless to say, Shu deserves a ridiculous ridiculous amount of credit for where the Houston Outlaws currently stand. He's one of the best at his role. He's the best on basically every flex support hero that you can think of, or one of the best. So he is rightfully in this MVP race, and I would not be complaining in the slightest if he took it home. And last but certainly not least is someone whose stock actually rises by the day. With how the Mayhem are peaking at the right time and what he's done this entire season, he is firmly in this race and might actually be a dark horse to win the entire thing right from underneath some of these other popular players' noses. Like I said earlier, someone is by far and none the most valuable player at the tank role. It's not particularly close either. He genuinely is what a true potential tank player looks like in Overwatch 2, where he can do no wrong no matter the hero. He's a tank by himself with no other backups on hand, but he can play any meta just fine and stand for himself as one of the best. In a primary Winston meta against some excellent veterans like Smurf and Fearless, he holds his own as one of the best. You want to play Ramatra Rush? Well, he's arguably the best Ramatra in the league. And when it comes to more of the off-tank centric stuff, like with Sigma for example, he can even play really good on that type of stuff and find value that you probably wouldn't expect him to just knowing what his past was like. I'm serious, man. Someone is exactly what every tank player, professional or not, should be striving to be. This is true potential unlocked in the Overwatch League at the tank position. We saw some nasty stuff from like Smurf and Hanbin last year even, but someone honestly takes it a step further by genuinely not having any noticeable flaws in his game. He's so young, he's so talented, he allows for the Mayhem to be comfortable no matter the scenario, and he's a true leader for this team with how vocal he is. The Mayhem are pretty talented from top to bottom, they're very well-rounded, but someone is quite clearly the most impactful and important player when it comes to their game plan. He makes it so effortless to play around him. And that's exactly what you're looking for in an MVP. It's not just about being a god tier player, which he is. It's about making the lives of your teammates better and boosting them up. And that's what he does on a day-to-day basis. But on top of that, on the topic of being a god tier player, I just think he's by far been the best overall tank player. You can maybe argue that like Fearless, for example, is a better Winston, but when it comes to the well-roundedness that you need as a tank player, someone is second to none. It's just like Chio on main support, where you know for a fact that someone's got to be the best at his position. Combine all of his skills with Florida's incredible success story this year, and it becomes very easy to make an MVP argument for this guy. And right now, he honestly might be one of the favorites, and at the very least, he's one of my favorites. Right now, he's probably in a tie or in a close second with Fielder. Those two are like my top guys, with Shu and Lip trailing behind slightly, but still right there and could very much take it depending on how the last couple of weeks go. I really don't know what I'm gonna do just yet, but if there was a gun pointed to my head, it was life or death. If I had to pick, I'd lean towards Fielder ever so slightly, as Atlanta have just found the most success of any team. They won the tournament, and Fielder has basically been the driving force and the brains behind the entire operation. I really don't think you can go wrong with him, with the kind of year he's had, with his domination every single game. It makes a lot of sense. He's like the most ideal support player. He'll always focus on the team, but when the opportunity arises, he will make that play himself, and when his team is in a bind, he can step up and become that clutch factor and that #1 playmaker. He literally does it all on a dime. Like, it's just so rare to have a player like that while finding value in like such a surgical way with that kind of mindset that he has. I really don't want to ignore the season that he's put up this year with how insane he's been for Atlanta Reign on arguably the most important position in the league. So I'd say by a slight margin that Fielder would be my MVP if I had to pick today. Now, maybe tomorrow I'll wake up on the other side of the bed and feel differently, but right now I'd say that Fielder's my #1. That pretty much sums up my thoughts on the MVP race and the ballot and all that stuff. So now I'll turn things over to you and ask you what you think of the MVP ballot this year. Do you think people were snuffed? Do you think they did this list right? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below, as well as who you think deserves to win the MVP as of right now. We'll find out who wins the MVP probably in October when the season's about to end. So for now, all we can do is be patient and spark up some debates. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like if you did, and subscribe to the channel for more Overwatch League discussions just like this. And until next time, This is ATP, signing out. Peace.